Welcome into episode 177 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined once again by Scott McLaughlin. The Bruins and the Canadiens played at the Garden tonight. Bruins win 4-2, 55th win of the year. Bruins are now 55.
Wait, did you say the Canadiens were at TD Garden? They're allowed to do that still?
They're allowed to do that, Scott, apparently. And, after the game, I'm thinking to myself, it's like, that's it. Like, so an entire hockey season goes by where the Montreal Canadiens come to Boston once. I'm sorry, like they gotta fix that. They gotta add another divisional game.
It's divisional game. There's got to be 4 divisional games at least. It's got to be 2-2 at the very least. And if that means, if the way to do it is some Western Conference teams you only face once a year, then so be it. Like I think I looked at this before, and there's a way you can do it where like you can add the extra game in the division, play one Western Conference division twice each, one once each. And so it's like, okay, so then, everyone's like, oh, but you want to see Connor McDavid every year. So you'll see Connor McDavid in your building 2 out of every 3 years. Like, it's fine. I think everyone will survive. Most Bruins fans couldn't even watch Connor McDavid this year because it was buried on ESPN Plus. So,
yeah, and also it's like it's just for one reason or another, like for two teams that haven't really played a lot at all of the last couple of calendar years, dating back to really the initial COVID break. Like there was some piss and vinegar in this game. Like there was some disdain, which like, you have two teams on opposite ends of the standings and they haven't played a lot, as I just mentioned. And there's good fight. And it's just like, you're scratching your head. Like not only did it take until the final dozen games of the year for Montreal to come to Boston, but it's like, and that's it. Now I do think they play maybe one more time in Montreal, but it's just like how do you have what was once one of the greatest rivalries across all major North American sports, and it's like they come to Boston once and they go to Montreal. It's not. I don't like it. And to your point, there's a way that they can fix that. If you're a Bruins fan and the Seattle Kraken come to Boston as much as the Montreal Canadiens do, there's a problem. They got to fix that. So
yeah. And the second game in Montreal, and so the third meeting of the season, is the final game of the season, which is potentially completely meaningless for everyone. You could have, the Providence Bruins essentially playing in that game. Now it could mean something if the Bruins are, win that and they get break the Canadiens wins record. Like that, that could be interesting, especially the media up there. They'll make a big deal out of that. But if that's not on the line, then the third meeting between them is totally meaningless.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's just the Bruins Canadiens rivalry just isn't what it has been, and I really think a lot of it, you have the NHL scheduling to blame for a lot of it, because it's like, this year, even if they only played 3 times, but they played 3 times in October, November, it's like, all right, well, at least you have like 3 meaningful games early on. Both teams are still trying to, establish themselves. But the Bruins and the Canadiens didn't play the first game until against each other. It's like February or maybe like late January. And it's like at that point, both teams are already where they are now, essentially, as far as like in the standings, where they were in the standings. And then, and then you wait till the final 3 weeks of the season to play their last 2 games. It's just like in what world does that make any sense to have the Bruins and Canadiens played when they made them play?
Yeah, and like you think of this, what is the NHL's reasoning for the divisional playoff format? It's to create rivalries, right?
Yeah.
That's what they want. So why do they not take that same approach for the regular season? Like, what is more likely to create rivalries? Okay, you probably face the Lightning and Maple Leafs every year in the playoffs. All right, but you're not creating rivalries with anyone else in the division, or actually have meaningful division games. See those teams more often in the regular season. Like, to me, that's what creates rivalries, and that's what draws people in as well. Like the Western Conference games, like we mentioned, it's like those are the games that I know, just talking to friends, family, that like they don't really care about unless it's a Connor McDavid. But you throw, Maple Leafs, Habs on the schedule. All right, like people are like, oh yeah, okay, that's a game. Like that's something I'll make a point to watch. Um, so yeah, it's totally backwards. Like they're doing, one approach in the playoffs, and then for whatever reason in the regular season, when you probably need something to draw more eyeballs, they get away from it. Like, for years it was like NBC would try to build, rivalry night, like Wednesday night games. And it's like, so you're making rivalry night this like huge marketing initiative, and yet you don't actually have as many rivalry games. Like it's so backwards. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, nothing gets my rocks off more than Minnesota Wild at the Garden against the Bruins or the Nashville Predators when there could be some more original six games, but whatever. Obviously not the most positive note to start off the podcast, but it is like it's just very annoying. It's I think the NHL kind of sucks at marketing its game, and I think marquee matchups, even if it's not, because again, like going into the year, you don't know that the Bruins are going to go on this miraculous run. You don't know that the Canadiens are going to be in the fight for Bedard. Like both these teams could have been fighting for a wild card spot, and it's just like, I mean, I guess if that were the case at the end of the season, it would actually mean something. But whatever. So this game in particular, Scott, Tyler Bertuzzi scores his first goal as a Bruin officially. We talked about this last episode. He's had some bad puck luck, some goals that didn't count. This was good puck luck. It was a shot from behind the goal line that kind of deflected off a defender and in, and somehow didn't draw a minor penalty for high sticking on that play. It was pretty evident by
Yeah.
literally anybody in the building who watched the game, except for the referees. And this is not me just trying to bash the refs. This is literally like you're watching the play. The guy, like, this happened in front of the net from the guy who just had the puck. And if people want to say, well, he was high sticked afterwards, I mean, penalties are called after the whistle all the time. So the Bruins should have gone on a power play after that first goal, but they didn't. Either way, Bertuzzi puts the Bruins on the board 1-0, and I thought all night had some good jump. And again, just looking more and more confident, Scott. Not to repeat a similar topic we talked about last episode, but again, it's worth talking about. He looked more comfortable tonight than I thought he looked at any game prior to tonight as a Bruin.
Yeah, he's definitely getting there. And even though it's like some unfortunate goal, it's same place we've seen him a bunch, which is behind the net, right around the net. He's throwing the puck to the front of the net. Like he pretty consistently seems to get into dangerous areas and get pucks into dangerous areas. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's a lucky bounce off the stick, defender's stick past the goalie. But you create that by being in that position. When you're putting pucks into dangerous areas, things can happen. Like that's, if you're just throwing that pass, back to the point or whatever, and it gets deflected, then it's just bouncing harmlessly away. It's the fact that he is putting it towards the front. So, and that's something that we've seen him do pretty consistently. So nice to see him get rewarded for it. He has had some bad puck luck, particularly when it comes to scoring goals. But yeah, he does look more comfortable. I thought he was already looking more comfortable. I didn't think he necessarily needed the goal. But that's still like a good monkey to get off your back is that first goal with your new team, because the longer that drags on, the more can kind of get in your head a little or whatever. So after the game, like, because we've noticed before now, tonight maybe wasn't a great example because I think he only had that, I think, or actually no, he had 3 shots on goal. Okay, so that's a couple more. That's more than I thought. I've talked about how like he's been shooting it more, and I asked him, if that's kind of been like a conscious effort to do that, or if he's just getting to better positions where he has better shots. And he says like a little bit of both. Like he's finding the areas where he needs to be for his line mates and getting more comfortable there, which naturally leads to more shots. And he said like, and he's also looking to shoot more. Like he did feel like, he was just trying to fit in and, maybe set up his teammates more early on. So, yeah, that kind of like that all speaks to it. It's the, being more comfortable taking your shots and, knowing that like that's what's good for the team, and you don't have to be deferring to your line mates. And then also just find those open areas where Charlie Coyle likes to get the puck to, where Trent Frederick likes to get the puck to, like just learning his line mates. And he bounced around a little bit in this game too, because obviously we'll get to this, but AJ Greer got ejected in the first period, so there was a lot of shuffling after that, especially at the left wing spot. So he had some shifts on the fourth line, on the second line. He was even with Marchand and Bergeron, at least once or twice that I saw. So, bouncing around, but in particular getting comfortable with Coyle and Frederick.
Yeah, and obviously he was a over the top Macho Man Randy Savage elbow drop from the top rope type move for the Bruins at the deadline, and we know they were able to do so because a couple of guys, Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno, went on injured reserve. But Tyler Bertuzzi was a absolute massive big fish get that nobody really anticipated was going to be moving on at the trade deadline. So you come in with those expectations as somebody who's going to really help this team be the true front runner to win the cup. For him to be that player, he needs confidence. And as you mentioned, I think he was playing with confidence, but I just think that, and he was looking more comfortable. But there's no doubt that actually having one go in, it does make a difference. It really does, because it's not so much that I'm worried about him having confidence, next game or the game after, but you don't want him going into the playoffs not having scored that goal, just because I do think it eventually becomes a bit of a burden on their shoulders if so. He got that out of the way, so that's great. And I just think that I'm really, really excited to see what this team's going to look like when Taylor Hall's back on the ice, because just talk about a never-ending surge of offense and depth. Like you'll have Marchand, Bergeron, and DeBrusk, and then Krejci, Pastrnak, and Zacha, and then Coyle, Hall, and Bertuzzi. It's like, wow. It's like team opposition's heads are going to be spinning. I mean, and whatnot. So good for him to get his first goal as a Bruin officially. I just mentioned Bergeron, Marchand, and DeBrusk. DeBrusk gave the Bruins a 2-0 lead, and he has goals in 4 straight. So, Scott, I think you talked about on our last recording how he came out of the gates firing when he came back from injury, mainly off adrenaline and just excitement, and then kind of started skating in mud a little bit, trying to catch his wind and whatnot. But yeah, goals in 4 straight, heading into the playoffs. Seems like he's got his wind back, his conditioning back to where it needs to be as they enter into April here soon.
Yeah, I think this has been like so encouraging to see the way that DeBrusk comes back from stuff or just bounces back. Because in past years you would see him hit a little bit of a lull or cool down a little bit, and then it would just drag on and drag on. And this year, even late last season, when he hits a little bit of a lull, it's like he just seems so much more confident that he's going to be able to pull out of it, and then he actually does pull out of it. And yeah, this looks like the same Jake DeBrusk we saw basically right up until his injury. Like this is the DeBrusk who is not only a fit in your top 6 on your top line, or a complementary piece, but a guy who can help drive play in a top line role. And a couple times tonight, and especially in that goal, like you just see that burst where he sees a little bit of an opening and he takes it, and 2 Canadiens defenders are crashing into each other behind him. And that his finishing in close this season has been excellent. Like when he gets by those D, it's like I expect him to bury it, and he's always been, you know, a pretty good finisher, but this year it just looks like he really has confidence. We've seen him, you know, even like plays in close on the power play, and even when he gets denied, like think I think it was tonight, right? There was another chance he got behind the D, and I think Allen made a blocker save, and like it wasn't an easy save though. Like he needed to be in good position and have like a quick blocker reaction, and it's like that's, you know, DeBrusk like having that confidence of knowing where he's going and having like an accurate hard finish. Um, but yeah, that goal was really nice. Like that was just the again, like you see his skating is fully back where he gets that little bit of an opening and like the Canadians defenders just don't have a chance. It's like the only thing they could have done is tripped him and taken the penalty. Other than that, he's behind them and gone.
Yeah, and what I like about that play too is that he's attacking the middle of the ice. Like I think when he was struggling a couple of years ago in particular, he was very much on the perimeter. He wasn't going to the dangerous areas. He wasn't challenging defensemen with his speed and backing them off. And it just didn't lead to success. And there were some other reasons for his slumping, I guess, too, back in the day. But when you see him attack in the middle of the ice, and by the way, he split Savard. What's Savard's first name again? With Montreal?
David Savard.
Savard. You know, he's a big boy, and Joel Edmondson's a big guy too. And like, you know, it's not probably something that you look at those two defensemen. You're like, I want to split those two guys because it's, you know, they're big and they're physical. But he understood that he has the speed to do so, and he did, and he attacked. And then you talk about the finish down low. I mean, yeah, he's always been a good finisher there. I mean, he's really. I wonder what his career percentage in the shootout is, because I feel like he's like got to be a 45-50% guy in the shootout over his career, maybe more. And yeah, he always, whether if he's coming down on the left side, he always just has that like that floater that he does top left, and then if he's coming on the right side, he does the quick, you know, backhand forehand snapshot as he's cutting across left side of the crease with momentum. So he definitely has his go-to moves, and I'm sure goalies kind of know his tendency, but they just can't stop it, which is, you know, shows how much confidence he has in his abilities there. So that's great. So they take a 2-0 lead, and then and what I'm about to mention may have happened when it was scoreless or 1-0 or maybe 2-0. I don't really remember, but there was a point in the game where Pitlick on Montreal, he was able to catch Bergeron with a clear interference call that went uncalled, and the Bruins kind of responded to that, and Marchand took a penalty, and later in the period, AJ Greer, as you alluded to earlier, kind of cross-checked Mike Hoffman in the face, which we think he'll see supplementary discipline for. But it gave the Canadiens a 5-minute power play, and they were able to claw back into the game, make it 2-1.
Yeah, I thought, you know, Bruins for a while were, I think, responding to the physicality, and you know, Canadiens are clearly trying to get under their skin, and Bruins were responding the right way, you know, at first, where, yeah, Marchand's going after, why did I just blank on who hit Bergeron?
It was Pitlick.
Yeah, Pitlick. Yeah, like that's exactly what you want to do. Like that's now it was interesting because like I think it seemed like Pitlick wanted to like at least give Bergeron a bump, but he didn't deck him. You know, I don't know if he like fully intended to hit him as hard as he did, but it obviously he did make pretty solid contact, so it doesn't really, if you're the Bruins, it doesn't matter what his intentions were. Yeah, Marchand goes right after him. Like that's what you want to see. You know, I tweeted at the time, like that's the kind of penalty that guys love killing. Like, you know, Bench is thrilled to go out and try to kill that one. And it ends up only lasting like 24 seconds because then Montreal takes a penalty anyways. then Swayman gets snowed late, and McAvoy comes in, and that leads to another scrum. Swayman lands a punch. I was thinking like Swayman had a look like he wanted the goalie fight. Because even like after the Bergeron one, like he came out to center ice and he was like looking over, and he said after the game he was like, yeah, like Jake Allen kind of gave him a look, and he was like, is this really gonna happen? Am I gonna do this? And it didn't happen, but yeah, so like that was good. Like that's sticking up for teammates. That's whatever, dragging guys down, tag them to the ice. And then yeah, Greer takes it too far. He gets like a little bit of a slash there, but then he responds with a cross check to the face, and it's like, Jim Montgomery tried to say like after the game, he's like, yeah, I think his stick just rode up a little, and it's like, I don't know, that was kind of a pretty direct shot. Like, I don't know that he was really aiming anywhere else. And yeah, but then like Montgomery did say, it's like, yeah, that's a learning moment. We'll talk to him. We'll be like, hey, you gotta keep it in check a little bit, because obviously you can't take a penalty like that in the playoffs. And for a guy like Greer, where it's, hey, when everyone's healthy, like his spot's already in jeopardy, his playing time's already in jeopardy. You can't be giving coaches a reason to potentially not trust you, if you're going to react that way when things get heated. I think Greer, for the most part this year, has done a good job of walking up to the line and not crossing it. Like he's generally been a good kind of physical and agitator and responding the right way. Obviously, this was one case where he just went too far, got, whatever, a little too emotional, a little too heated, and gives them a 5-minute power play. They score once, had a couple other chances, but Bruins managed to, hold on to the lead through that.
I think he obviously was feeling some type of way because of who the Canadiens targeted. If you go near Patrice Bergeron and the Bruins feel like it's a non-hockey play or a clear penalty or targeting of their captain, it's gonna get under their skin a little bit more. So I think if you're a playoff opponent for the Bruins at any point this year, I think that's kind of it's probably what you're gonna want to draw up is like, look, make sure you play their top guys hard and see if you can get the rest of the team, the rest of the Wolf Pack kind of off their game and try to chase around for retribution. So I think to the point you're making about not, getting out of the way now and learning from it as opposed to the playoffs, I think the Bruins would be good to remember that. Like, look, it's guys aren't going to stop taking runs at Bergeron or Marchand or Pastrnak in the playoffs or McAvoy, and that's what playoff hockey is. So when they do that against the Bruins, their temperament and their composure is going to have to come into play, and their discipline. So in particular with a younger guy like Greer, it's kind of his first trip around the sun as far as a full-time member of an NHL team going to a playoff run. So, it didn't cost the Bruins in this game, but potentially against like a Toronto or a Tampa Bay in second round, or whoever they play in the first round, it could come back to bite them in the ass too. So lesson learned.
Yeah. I also like, I felt like that kind of put out some of the fire of the game too, where, it seemed like the Bruins were feeding off the emotion well in the most of the first period, and they get up to nothing, and like it had the feel of a game where it had the feel of like a poke the bear game where it was like, oh really, like you want to do this to us? All right, here's a 6-0 beatdown, Montreal. And then like the Greer thing happens, and it's like everyone on both sides was kind of like, all right, that's far enough. And I thought kind of temperature cooled off a bit after that, and it seemed like the Bruins game cooled off a bit after that. And I felt like, that was sort of what allowed Montreal to hang around, is like it seemed like that drive that they had in that first period where they looked, almost possessed, like as a team, like we're going to rally around everything. It felt like that sort of dissipated as the game went on. And, I think their play sort of matched that energy leaving the game where they they were pretty flat the rest of the game. They managed to close it out, and um, I didn't think they played poorly in the third period. Like it was a perfectly fine sort of defensive period, take care of business, get the 2 points. But they certainly didn't keep their foot on the gas by any means.
No, no, they certainly didn't. I think that's a good point you raised. I did sense that too. The game did kind of slow down after that Greer penalty because that's what happens when you have a 5-minute penalty and then you also have an intermission in between and whatever. It just yeah. It did have the makings of a pretty intense game and a game where you kind of thought maybe this will bring back a little bit of that Bruins Montreal hatred for next year and a couple afterwards with some of these young players on both sides. But yeah, it did kind of turn into a bit of a snooze fest if I'm being honest, the second half of that game and whatnot. But one thing that kept the game entertaining for me at least was the watch for 50 for Pastrnak. And the reason that became a possibility in the second half of the game is because he gave the Bruins a 3-1 lead with his 49th goal of the year in the second period. A nice pass from the right boards from Tyler Bertuzzi, and then Pastrnak kind of, as we've seen him do a lot this year, just kind of took that extra second, stepped to the middle, and put a wrist shot 5-hole. And like I said, 49th goal of the year. Would have been nice to see him get 50 at some point. With the crowd was waiting for it. It would have been nice to get it against Montreal. But I will say, Scott, if he's gonna get 50, it'd be nice if there was a goalie in net. So I'm kind of like, if it's between 49 for the year or 50 with an empty net, I'll take 50 with the empty net just to get there. But I'd like to see him maybe get that 50th goal in a way he's done it for most of his career, which is with a goalie in net.
Yeah, Marchand was clearly trying to set him up. Like Marchand had a pretty clear shot. There's kind of like one guy between him and the net, but yeah, he makes the pass over to Pastrnak that really didn't have much of a chance of connecting. Yeah, I agree. Like I almost feel like Pastrnak didn't really say that after the game. He was like, "Yeah, like it was nice of Marshy," and but then he highlighted because he was basically asked like, "What does that say about Marchand as sort of a leader, unselfish player, whatever?" And Pastrnak pretty quickly pivoted to like, well, the real sign of like what he is as a leader was sticking up for Bergeron. Yeah, I think Pastrnak will probably want to score on an actual goal as well. Um, Now Swayman setting him up for a shot at the empty net. I love that. Like they should have just been passing back to him. He took 2 shots at it. Wasn't particularly close, but up by 2, why not? Like he wants it. He wants it. He wants to match Linus there. Um, yeah, that also that on Pasternak's goal again, another one where this time at 5-on-5, we've seen a bunch on the power play where he gets that puck in the left circle, takes that quick step in, and just beats the goalie with a quick wrister. This one 5-hole on Allen, and after the game, like I asked Swayman about it, like from a goalie's perspective, and he was like, "Yeah, it's tough because he just like totally changes the angle. Like first you're thinking one timer, then he doesn't do that. You have to kind of reset. Um, and he gets a shot off like while the goalie's still moving and trying to reset. Um, and I also thought it was interesting, like at Pastrnak, um, Steve Conroy and I both asked Pastrnak like a little bit about it, and he said like the reason he started doing it on the power play is that not not just teams like trying to take away his one timer, but he feels like there's been a trend in the NHL this year of penalty kills getting wider out on the elbows in general, and just being closer to him. So just because of that, like the one timer hasn't been there as much. So he's basically he started doing that because he was like, okay, well, if that defender on the elbow is going to come out further, then I'm going to step inside more and change the angles. So he's scored quite a few goals with that little step inside now, and it keeps working. And it's like he's not, stepping in and blasting shots into the top corner. He's like beating goalies 5-hole and under the arm because it's just kind of catching them off guard.
I feel like he kind of took that page out of Nikita Kucherov's book a little bit. I feel like that's something that I've seen him do over the last few years. And I think Pastrnak may have, picked that up from another elite goal scorer in the world. So Montreal ended up climbing back within one on a power play goal with Garnet Hathaway in the box. And then ultimately, David Krejci was able to give the Bruins a 4-2 lead, and that would be the final score of the game. It was Krejci. I think it was a shot from the point from Clifton or shot pass, and Krejci just kind of went for him back in and tucked it on the left side for his 16th of the year, I believe was 16th of the year. I'm not sure if the Bruins website is updated through tonight's game, but
yeah, it was a 16th.
Okay. So he's got 16 goals on the year, 39 assists, 55 points in 65 games. For reference, he has one less point than Patrice Bergeron for third on the team in scoring, but he's also played 6 less games than Bergeron. So when you're talking about a player who was not in the NHL last year, and David Krejci, obviously he was in Czech Republic playing in front of family and friends, and he has one less point in 6 less games than Patrice Bergeron, who's having another outstanding year and Selke caliber year. I guess, Scott, we haven't really talked about Krejci. We've talked about him, but I guess just now that we're getting towards the end of the season, I guess we can kind of talk about his regular season in a more of a macro perspective at this point. And just what are your thoughts on his game this year? Do you think going into the playoffs he's back up to full speed? I know it kind of sounds like he is, right, with the point production, but from the eye test, would you say he's back to where he should be? And just your thoughts on him this year and his impact on the team if this is his last go around for the Bruins.
Yeah, I think as much mentally as anything. Like when we were talking earlier in the season about sometimes he doesn't look quite up to speed. To me it was because he's never been the fastest skater. So to me it wasn't like, oh my god, he can't keep up, or he can't outskate guys or whatever. It was he seems to just be a little too slow reading plays, hanging onto the puck just a little too long. And I that's the part I think is gone now. So that's what tells me that, yeah, he's back up to speed. It's that he is mentally processing the game as quickly as we're used to seeing, which is obviously at a very high level because he is a very smart player who sees the ice, sees plays extremely well. And I think you're seeing that now where it's, every game, like there seems to be a play where he'll hold it, or he sees a lane opening up, or waits for a lane to open up, and just kind of like that control with the puck and his stick um to not rush anything, but also to protect the puck and not, let someone pick his pocket or catch up to him. That seems to be there. And yeah, it's like you're right. Like we don't talk about him a ton other than, around like the 1000 game ceremony and, some of that stuff. Because it's almost just like quietly really good. It's like that his line has been their most productive line all season offensively. And obviously Pasternak's a huge reason for that, but so is Krejci. Like he's in control in the middle, and Pasternak's not getting as many great chances as he does if Krejci's off or not playing up to his abilities. So, yeah, I think he's in a really good spot heading towards the playoffs. I think he is playing really well, and again, like a lot of those points that he's getting are 5-on-5. He's not having a great year on the power play. He's on the second unit. He had a stretch early this year where he went like 20 games without an assist on the power play, which, you're like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Like, Krejci is always assisting on everything. He just had a stretch where he had gone, I forget the exact number of games, but it was a long drought of games without a goal in the power play. So he's doing most of it at 5-on-5, and, you know, 80% of NHL games are played at 5-on-5. So that's huge. And, I think we touched on this a little on the most recent Sunday skate with Razor. Like, I wonder how teams are gonna choose to match up against the Bruins in the playoffs, like which line they're gonna prioritize trying to shut down or putting their best defensive line against, because obviously we know, like, it's always been for years it's been the perfection line, or probably whatever line Bergeron and Marchand were on. And now it's like, I wonder if that shifts and they focus on the check line, which would obviously now free up Marchand, Bergeron, and DeBrusk, who, as we just said, they have now found their stride as well. So, yeah, good luck to opponents trying to decide that, trying to decide which line you're gonna take your chance against with maybe a lesser defensive line.
Right. And oh, by the way, as mentioned earlier, then you got a third line with Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi on it, flanked with
Yeah.
Charlie Coyle in the middle. So, I mean, it's really more than a 2-line attack. It's a 3-line attack. And the fourth line is more than capable too. But, I think if you're an opponent, I just, with all due respect to Marchand and Bergeron and their careers and what those two are capable of, I just feel like if you're an opponent, how can you, with a straight face, not put your top defensive forwards against a 50-plus goal scorer in Pastrnak? Just because, how can you not do that? Just saying it out loud just sounds idiotic. And I know, believe me, I know how dangerous Bergeron and Marchand are. Like, I've been watching these guys for almost 20 years for Bergeron and almost 15 for Marchand. I get it, believe me. But again, you're talking about Pastrnak being a 50-plus goal scorer this year. You got to kind of keep him at bay. It's just the way that it is. So I do believe that would open up that Bergeron line for some optimal matchups, especially at home. So yeah. And it's crazy because we talk about Pavel Zacha and how much of a pleasant surprise he's been this year and how awesome he's been this year. And he's played 6 more games than Krejci and he has 7 less points. So it's just like, it's a microcosm of Krejci's career in Boston. He's just a silent assassin. He just he doesn't have the best shot, doesn't have the greatest legs, not the most physical guy. I mean, there's tons of guys with great hands, so he's not like the guy with the best hands in the league. I mean, he's a great passer and all that stuff. Like, there's not one thing he does the best. Except maybe think the game. He does probably think the game as well as probably better than probably 95% of the players in the league. But with that said, just his entire career, he's never, I don't think what hurts him, Scott, is I feel like he's never cracked 80 points. So people don't think of him as like a dynamic scorer because he's never gotten like 80 or 90. But he's just been quietly in the 70s his whole career, it seems like. So, and I don't think he'll get there this year. But he could. I mean, he could get close to 70. He'd have to get 15 more points in the last, whatever it is, 11 games. But in all likelihood, he'll probably finish with probably around 65 points this year. But yeah. So I echo everything you said. He's great. He's allowed the Bruins to slide everybody into appropriate locations, and honestly, Krejci's presence has allowed the Bruins to slide guys down the lineup when they should be playing up in the lineup, like Taylor Hall and Bertuzzi, like we talked about. Those guys are not third line players in the NHL, but they are in this current roster and whatnot. And obviously, Zacha has benefited from Krejci and Pastrnak, and that countryman connection that those guys have is, it's huge. So anyway, we kind of rambled on Krejci for a little bit there. there was a question I wanted to ask you, Scott. I think it was based on a comment Marchand made, I think after practice yesterday or today. And he made a comment how the Bruins are very cognizant of making sure they finish playing the season strong, because chances are they'll be playing they're going to be playing a wild card team, but chances are that wild card team has been playing playoff hockey for quite some time now to solidify their playoff spot. And that's why in the first round in particular, sometimes you see upsets, because the lower seed has been playing higher stake hockey because the higher seed has kind of been solidified in their place. So is that something, even though the Bruins are aware of that being a possibility of letting their game slip and whatnot, or not letting their game slip, like, does it concern you that they're cognizant of it, yet it still kind of seems to be how they're playing, like just kind of like lackadaisical, just waiting to get to the finish line to start the playoffs?
Not yet. I would say if we still see some of this like for 3 of the final 5 games of the regular season or something, then I'd be like, okay, that's not ideal. But I kind of thought a couple weeks ago, and I wonder like if Jim Montgomery sort of regrets saying this. I felt like he like put a timeline on when they have to turn it back on, because he was asked, it was like after the trade deadline, he was asked, does it really feel like the stretch run now where it's a, sprint to the finish? And he was like, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, no, it not really. Like, it doesn't really feel like that yet. And he picked a date. He picked 5 games to go, April 6th, when they return from a weekend back to back. They play Pittsburgh and St. Louis. And then they have 3 days off before they play Toronto on Thursday, April 6th. They have 5 games left at that point. He said he thinks that is when it'll really feel like, all right, this is the final push. It's, time to go. And I almost like I thought of it, it a little at the time, and how they've played and kind of gone a little in and out since, sort of, I feel like it almost confirms, like, I just wonder if, did the players hear that, and now in like their mind, not that they consciously thought like, all right, we'll cruise until April 6th and then we'll give it our all. Like, I don't think that's like a conscious thing that they're doing, but I think it's kind of human nature for that to maybe seep in a little. Um so, but I think the encouraging thing is, though, that because they're cognizant of it and because they know it's like important to still play well, have good habits, don't let, you know, bad habits seep in, all that. Like, I think that's why they're able to respond mid road trip and get going again. And it's why, if they have another slip up of a couple games here sometime soon, like, I trust that they're going to get out of it and get back to playing how they have to play in relatively quick fashion. Um, I've made this comparison before, but like we saw with the Celtics before, and starting like a little before and then after the All-Star break, like their game really slipped, and arguably they still haven't gotten back. Like, as we sit here now, they had a good end to their road trip in Sacramento. But like the Celtics, their quote unquote malaise, if you want to use that word, has lasted like a really long time now, to the point where it's like legitimately concerning. Whereas with the Bruins, I think they seem to be able to pull out of it quicker and know that, like, again, like they had that team meeting on a Thursday in Winnipeg, and it's like, okay, 4 games is enough. Like, screw that. We're getting back to playing how we have to play.
Right. And I think, like, if you're looking at the first round, the Bruins don't have to be worried about Pittsburgh or the Islanders beating the Bruins. They have to be worried about the Bruins beating the Bruins, because if you go into the first round and you're playing sloppy hockey, and if you think about the playoffs from a step back, you say to yourself, I can't see anybody beating the Bruins 4 times in 7 games. I just can't, especially in the first round. But when you break it down and you start to think about it one step at a time, like if the Bruins are struggling going into the playoffs and they're just not playing the way that they're capable of, and you lose the first 2 games at home, say because you're not ready to go, and then you got to go on the road and you're down a couple of games and you're starting to grip the sticks a little too tight, and you're feeling the pressure from the outside noise. It's like, oh crap, like now they got to lose only 2 more games, and they got to win 4 or 5. And my point is, as impossible as it seems that the Bruins would have about in the first round, or like it, if you aren't ready to go, things happen fast and momentum is real and whatnot. So they will be ready to go. I have no doubt. I'm just saying, like, this is why it's important this is why it can be a challenge. I mean, look, like, do you think that Tampa Bay lost to the Columbus just because Columbus was better? No. And I'm not comparing the Bruins to that Lightning team. But what happened was you had a Lightning team that hadn't played competitive hockey in a month and a half, probably 2 months, because they were already solidified in their spot, and they weren't as desperate as Columbus, and just they weren't ready to play playoff style hockey like Columbus had been going into that series. So the Bruins gotta play with desperation from the jump, round 1, game 1, and I feel like they gotta trick their minds in the final few games of this regular season and into thinking that they're playing something for something, and because you want to play desperate hockey before you actually need to be playing desperate hockey. That's just, you don't want to be down 2 games to none. Like from the start, play on your toes and understand that the regular season happened and it was great, but everybody starts back at 0-0. The only difference is you have home ice and other teams don't. But in hockey, home ice doesn't really mean that much because there's so much parity and whatnot. So I'm not concerned about the Bruins. They'll be fine. I'm just saying, like, if we're speculating about what could be a danger for this team because everything is going so well for them, and even when they don't play great, they still find ways to win, which is a good sign. Ultimately, I think they have too much talent and depth, and that will overcome any slow starts that they have before they get going. But I'm hoping that they don't even have to have a slow start, that they can just hit the ground running and play the way that they're capable of playing, because I don't think there's a team as talented nor as deep as this Bruins team this year. I really don't. So the expectations are sky high. They've set that bar, and there really is. There's no excuses for this team to not at least go. I mean, I want to say 4 rounds and win it, but at least 3 rounds. And obviously anything can happen. Like one of your top guys can go down, and for the whole playoffs, and that changes things. But as things stand today with their roster as it's going to be healthy, this Bruins team, they have no excuse not to take care of business. They're better than everybody else, and they're deeper, and they have a lot of intangibles that are desirable too for a playoff team that other teams don't have. They literally have everything, and they have a passionate fan base to be an effective home crowd too. So again, not to keep mounting the pressure, but it's the pressure because it's the bar that they've set for themselves and whatnot. So I don't know if you had any closing thoughts on my rambling there, Scott, but
No,
I'm just ready for the playoffs. I just want to see this team in action.
You did touch on one thing that I'm going to be a little interested in, which is the playoff crowd, which yes is always awesome, but I wonder like if demand's going to be so high, if resale prices are going to be so, because we've seen this a couple times in the regular season, like that Bruins Rangers game right after the trade deadline, prices for tickets were crazy. And that wasn't really a great crowd. Like now it was a Saturday afternoon, so that's a little weird too. But like that was kind of a quieter crowd. And I wonder if, a lot of diehards are going to get priced out in the playoffs if everyone's just, everyone who has money hey, I want to go see the historic Bruins. Like it's crossed my mind a couple times. So I think Boston fans would generally rise to the occasion no matter what, even if, some of the diehards are kind of left behind and um, unfortunately can't afford to be there. But it's crossed my mind. Like, I feel like it could be a little bit more of a white collar crowd than usual.
Well, I mean, you know what, Scott? Write the headline now. I think you get some clicks if you had some sort of article about how the Bruins fans are going to be great in the playoffs this year. That'd get people talking now.
No, but like my point is like it's not even necessarily they're Bruins fans, but not the diehards. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Are you saying bandwagoners who can afford to go
Yeah,
spend $3,000
yeah,
for a
pretty
playoff
much.
ticket?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that's the way of the world these days. It's I mean, I don't know what the ticket prices will be going for the playoffs, but yeah, it does suck. But whoever is fortunate enough to go to these playoff games, hopefully they make the noise. I know Scott's gonna be throwing popcorn at the opposition from the ninth floor, so we have that going for us at least. Might be a suspension. Might have to dip into your pockets a little bit, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We'll find like a skate pod sponsor. Maybe throw some money in. So yeah.
Hey, maybe you guys can sneak me up there for the playoffs. After all year, I'm just buying my time to go up there, wait for a credential. This guy hasn't been here all year. Who the hell is this? That's just our line mate Brian. He's special, so don't worry about him. But very good. All right, so we'll that should do it for this episode. We will be back Sunday. Scott, who are they playing on Sunday? The Bruins.
Carolina.
Okay.
So I think Saturday against Tampa, I feel like will be a good game, and Sunday in Carolina to me is like the perfect load management game because it's a 1 day trip. It's very weird scheduling. It's down and back, like a back to back. They just fly down to Carolina, fly back that night. So that to me is like perfect. Like, all right, Patrice Bergeron, you don't have to you don't have to take these 2 flights for for this game. This is your rest game. Maybe it's Charlie McAvoy's rest game. Like, I could see that where this is one of the ones where like a couple heavy hitters actually sit.
Which you're not really getting a massive look at the two teams at full strength if that's the case. Which guess we'd have to wait for the conference finals potentially to see that. We talked about last week how Svechnikov is done for the year for Carolina. I don't know about you, Scott. That really kind of has affected my power rankings in the East in the playoffs. I do think that Carolina's a offensively challenged team, and you take away their arguably best offensive player and certainly power forward. I just think it might be too tough for them to overcome offensively. So, whatever. Maybe they shut me up and they prove me wrong. But I'm kind of looking at maybe the Rangers or maybe New Jersey.
Yeah, and I still don't fully trust Carolina's goaltending either. Now they give up so few good chances that they can still win a bunch of low scoring games even without elite goaltending. But I do feel like that that might cost them at some point. Yeah, I mean, I like the Devils. Like, they never fell off, and then they got Timo Meyer. That's just a straight up really good team. And the Rangers have started turning it on. Like, we talked about how they were struggling a little bit after the deadline, and were there almost too many mouths to feed with Tarasenko and Kane coming in. Well, it seems like they've found their stride and have been playing some really good hockey. They've had a couple just total blowout wins where that the offensive firepower that everyone's waiting for has shown up. So they might be, starting to click at just the right time as well.
Very good. Scott, do you have any closing thoughts before we go?
Nope, all good.
All right, I am all good as well. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you on Sunday.